Welcome back, everyone.
Glad to be back.
Sometimes a case comes along that really stays with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And the Desiree Mashad case from 1984, this is one of those for me.
Yeah,
This young woman found murdered in a Connecticut motel room. It's the kind of story that just grabs you.
it really does.
And, it's been almost 40 years, and still no answers.
It's a mystery.
So we've got this episode of the Deck podcast that digs into the details, and I
Oh,
thought
yeah. The deck is great.
we could do a deep dive,
Love that.
and try to see if we can, I don't know, maybe shed some new light on it. Or
All right, see what we can make of it.
what stands out to you about this case right away?
Well, I think for me, it's the fact that it just resonates with so many people, even after all these years.
No.
It speaks to something, bigger than just the crime itself.
It's like it taps into something.
Something about how society views certain types of women.
Especially, women like Desiree who were involved in sex work.
Exactly. Their stories, their lives, they often get overlooked.
It's like they become invisible.
Sadly, yeah.
And we can't let that happen,
Right. We have to remember that at the heart of this is a human being, a young woman with hopes and dreams.
And then she's just gone.
Just like that.
So let's start with the facts, like the basics.
Okay, sounds good.
The deck does a great job of describing the crime scene, this motel room,
Oh, yeah.
and it's pretty messy.
It's a mess. Clothes everywhere, bottles, food containers, like someone was there for a while.
It almost makes you think there was a struggle, or,
At least someone was in a hurry to leave.
and then you've got Desiree, they found her.
Yeah, on the bed, nude radio cord around her neck, puncture wound on her chest.
Awful.
Yeah, her boyfriend at the time, George, he found her.
Oh, right, George, or Angel, I think they called him sometimes.
Right, Angel. Yeah, he called the police, obviously.
So he's a big part of the investigation from the very beginning.
Of course.
But the podcast also mentioned someone in the next room
Right, a gap.
who said they heard this big argument,
Loud argument, yeah, coming from Desiree's room.
like around 1 a.m.
Yeah, late, which suggests maybe someone else was there before.
before she died.
Exactly.
So it's not just George we have to think about.
No, it gets more complicated.
And then they bring up this thing about hypnosis.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
The police hypnotized this guest, the one who heard the argument.
To try and get more details, about what they heard.
I guess that was the thing back then.
Yeah, in the 80s, it was pretty common, but it's not really reliable.
No.
It can create false memories, make people remember things differently.
So we have to be careful with that information.
Absolutely.
And then there's this whole thing with the cowboy.
Right, the cowboy.
Apparently, people at the motel said they saw this guy,
Dressed like a cowboy, full-on cowboy outfit.
and he was outside Desiree's room that night.
That's what they said?
So, of course, the police, they jump on that.
Yes. Big time. They released sketches, followed up leads, even said they found him.
But later on, it sounds like they weren't so sure.
Not so clear. Yeah, maybe they never really knew who he was.
Maybe it was all a distraction.
Who knows?
So we got a messy crime scene, a witness who might not remember things correctly, and a cowboy who may or may not even exist.
It's a lot to untangle.
And we haven't even talked about Desiree herself,
Right, her life, her background.
And that's a big part of this story.
It is, and the deck doesn't shy away from it. They talk about how Desiree was a sex worker.
Yeah, and that she'd been arrested for it before.
Yeah, starting at 16.
So young.
And there's this man, Sonny.
Right, she said he assaulted her when she was 16.
Yeah, another layer to this whole thing.
It makes you wonder how much her work played into all of this.
Did the police even take it seriously?
Or did they just dismiss her because of what she did for a living?
It's a valid question.
And what about her clients? Did they look into any of them?
And Sonny, what happened with him? Was he ever a suspect?
These are all things we need to consider.
For sure.
And we have to remember, this was the 80s.
A different time.
Attitudes about sex work were different then.
Very different.
It's possible that influenced the investigation.
Yeah, maybe without even realizing it.
It's like the whole context of the case matters.
The historical context, the social context, it all feeds into how things unfolded.
We can't just look at it through today's lens
Exactly. We have to try and understand what it was like then,
to really get a clear picture.
of what might have happened to Desiree. And one thing that really stood out to me from the Desiree,
Yeah.
they talk about how Desiree wasn't examined for sexual assault,
Oh, wow.
like at all.
That's a pretty big oversight.
Huge, especially given, everything else we know.
Her history.
Exactly.
You'd think that would be standard procedure, right?
You would think so, but back then, it wasn't always the case.
Really?
especially when it came to sex workers.
Oh, so maybe there was some bias there.
Maybe conscious, maybe not. It's hard to say.
But it definitely makes you question how thorough the investigation really was.
Absolutely.
And, you know, even if they had examined her,
Yeah.
back then, forensic science wasn't what it is today.
Nowhere near as advanced.
DNA testing was barely a thing.
Right. They might not have been able to do much with the evidence, even if they had it.
They did eventually test some of the evidence, right?
Well, yeah. In 2010, a cold case unit took another look.
But no matches.
Nothing.
Makes you wonder if they could find something now with all the new technology.
Well, touch DNA, all that. They could maybe find something they missed before.
It's possible.
Anything's possible with this case.
So let's talk suspects.
Okay.
The podcast really focuses on a few people.
George, the boyfriend.
Right. Sonny, the guy who Desiree said assaulted her.
And, of course, the cowboy.
So many questions with each of them.
Starting with George.
The detective says he insisted he didn't do it,
Yeah, maintained his innocence the whole time.
and he passed a polygraph.
So they say,
But even if he's telling the truth,
could he have known something, seen something?
maybe protected someone else.
We don't know.
The podcast doesn't really go into it.
Not much detail there.
And then there's Sonny.
The guy from her past.
Police looked into him but ruled him out.
But we don't know why.
Did he have an alibi? Did something else come up?
No clue.
It's frustrating, like a piece of the puzzle is missing.
Like a dead end.
And then, of course, the cowboy.
The mysterious cowboy.
Did they ever actually figure out who he was?
That's the big question.
They said they found him, but then later, it sounds like they weren't so sure.
A lot of back and forth.
Makes you think maybe it's all a show,
To make it look like they were making progress.
Or really they were going nowhere.
Could be.
We talked about the hypnosis thing.
Oh, yeah, the witness?
What if that messed everything up,
Their memories could be totally off.
leading the police in the wrong direction?
It happens.
So many things could have gone wrong.
That's the thing about investigations, especially back then.
It's like trying to navigate a maze in the dark.
With only a few clues to guide you.
You mentioned the 80s being a different time.
Oh, yeah, it was.
What else was going on back then that might be important to this case?
Well, for one thing, no cell phones.
Oh, right.
No internet, no way to track people like we can now.
So if someone wanted to disappear,
It was a lot easier.
and with the whole stigma around sex work,
People might have been afraid to talk.
even if they knew something,
Scared of getting judged, getting in trouble.
makes it even harder to find the truth.
Definitely adds another layer of complexity.
But even with all that,
There are still questions we can ask.
things we can learn from Desiree's story.
Exactly, and I think one of the most important things is to see beyond the stereotypes.
To remember that she was a person,
A real person with her own hopes and dreams.
not just a case file.
Right, the podcast talks about how she was an artist.
Wanted a better life.
She was trying to escape the circumstances that led her to sex work.
It's a reminder that everyone has a story,
Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.
no matter what their life looks like.
Exactly.
And it's amazing how her story has inspired others.
The play, for
A
example,
whole play based on her life.
shows how powerful her story is, how it continues to resonate with people.
Even after all these years.
It's like a legacy, a way for her voice to be heard.
Even though she's gone.
And it makes you think about how we can prevent this from happening again.
What can we learn from Desiree's case?
How can we do better as a society?
So many things could have been different.
Choices that could have been made.
Paths that could have been taken.
It's heartbreaking to think about. It really is. And I think one of the biggest things we can take away from all of this is, we need to do better when it comes to recognizing those biases, those societal biases.
Yeah.
Especially towards, marginalized communities like sex workers.
Absolutely. We have to create a space where everyone feels safe.
Safe to come forward to report crimes.
Without feeling judged or like no one's going to believe them.
Exactly.
And in Desiree's case, it's clear that, her being a sex worker,
Yeah.
it probably played a role in how the police handled things.
It's hard to say for sure, but
But you have to wonder if things would have been different if she had been,
if she had been seen differently by society,
if they had taken her more seriously.
it's a tough question.
And we can't change the past, but we can learn from it.
That's the key,
And
right?
try to do better in the future.
To make sure something like this doesn't happen again.
And that starts with each of us,
Being more aware of our own biases.
challenging those stereotypes,
Speaking up for those who don't have a voice.
making sure everyone feels seen and heard and valued.
It's about creating a world where everyone feels safe.
And it's about justice for Desiree.
For her family, for her loved ones.
Her case might be cold, but it's not over.
Someone out there might still have information.
That one piece of the puzzle that could change everything.
And if you're listening to this,
If you know anything about Desiree's case,
anything at all,
no matter how small it might seem,
please reach out to the Groton Police Department.
your tip could be the one that brings justice for Desiree.
And helps her family finally find some peace.
So that's the Desiree Mashad case.
A story that stays with you.
A reminder that we have to keep fighting for justice.
For everyone.
For every life lost, for every question left unanswered.
We can't let these cases fade away.
We owe it to Desiree and to all the others
to keep searching for the truth.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
Stay curious out there, everyone.